Good afternoon, and welcome to Just Parlays with Chris King. It's Thursday afternoon, September 29th. Hopefully, things are going well where you are today. Of course, our thoughts are with everybody that's in the path of now Tropical Storm Ian. As you saw, I'm sure it dumped plenty of rain and such in the Florida area and is working its way up the East Coast. It shuffled around a lot of games already for the weekend, so we'll have to see how that continues to play out. I know the Phillies had their game with the Nationals for Saturday. At least one of them moved. They were supposed to play, I believe, a doubleheader Saturday. The first game was moved to tomorrow, so they'll play 2 tomorrow at Nationals Park. Not sure if our buddy Jim Williams will be there or not, but you never know. Quiet night for the most part last night on the diamond. Of course, the big news was Aaron Judge actually got a pitch to hit, tied Roger Maris with his 61st home run of the season. It was nice to see Toronto actually threw a pitch. Now Mitch White can go in the, record books with so many other mediocre guys. But hey, at least he'll always be remembered, right? So there's that. News coming out from the NFL today that the Kansas City-Tampa Bay game will remain in Tampa Bay. They were originally talking about if they had to move it, it would be moved to U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. But apparently, Tampa avoided the worst of the weather that ripped through Florida yesterday. So that game is going to take place at Raymond James Stadium. Whether that's good for Tampa Bay or not, well, we'll have to see. They didn't look good against Green Bay last week. We'll see how that pans out this week against a pretty high-octane Kansas City offense. Will Tom Brady be able to generate enough offensively with the way that the Bucs have looked so far? That's something we can look at tomorrow and going forward. What else did we see yesterday? We saw another low-scoring game in Tampa Bay with Tampa Bay as the Guardians ended up beating the Rays 2-1 in 10 innings. A lot of strikeouts in that game. I think Tampa Bay struck out 14 times and Cleveland struck out 13 times. But coming into today, you look at the playoff picture. In the American League, the Blue Jays own the top wild card spot by a game and a half over Tampa Bay. Seattle is 2 games back. Baltimore losing yesterday in a lower scoring game than I think a lot of people expected. I know personally I thought it was going to be another high-scoring affair given how poorly Kramer had pitched against Boston in his career and how washed up Rich Hill is at this point. So the Orioles lost another game in the standings. Now they're 4.5 back with 7 to play. Looking bleak for them there at this point. I know, James. We needed him on Monday too, but Judge did just get walked in the first 2 games of the series. And Andrew, of course, you have to mention what's going on with the weather in Florida. Hopefully, your family is safe down there in Fort Myers. I know there's a lot of people that don't have power and things like that. But at least for most of Florida, it seems like the worst has passed, and now they face the unenviable task as they do almost every year of trying to get through all of that mess going forward. Yeah, I know we were 1 hit away. That's the fickle part about sports, especially when you got a guy that's chasing a record. Is nobody wants to be the guy to be known as the guy that gave up 61 ever when McGuire got to 62, and nobody wanted to be that guy either, and it ended up falling, with Traxel and Mike Morgan and all those guys, and it's unfortunate. I mean, I get the fact that Toronto's in the playoff race and they're trying to maintain their position, but I mean, they were walking Judge like he was Barry Bonds in his prime in that series, and it comes to a point where it's just ridiculous. But, that's a rant for a different day, I'm sure. Looking at the National League playoff picture, the Mets now lead the Braves by, a game in the standings now because, the Mets rallied to beat Miami yesterday after trailing 4-0 after 6.5. They went on to win in extra innings. So now they hold a one-game lead because Atlanta, we talked about it yesterday, you can't trust Jake Odorizzi. And he didn't pitch badly. I'll give him credit for that. But, the Washington Nationals pulled out a 3-2 win in 10 on a base hit by C.J. Abrams. So that puts the Braves one back heading into that important series this weekend down in Atlanta, barring some massive change that we haven't heard of yet. Then you've got San Diego, 2.5 games up on the Phillies for the second wild card spot. Philadelphia finds themselves in a scary situation right now because it looks like another late September swoon for the Phillies. They've lost 4 straight now. They enter today with just a half-game lead on the Brewers for that final wild card spot. Philadelphia has 8 games left. Milwaukee has 7. Milwaukee opening a series tonight with the Marlins. It'll be Braxton Garrett taking on Eric Lauer. The Phillies close out a 3-game set on the north side of Chicago. That game starting in about 15 minutes. It's Ranger Suarez taking on Javier Assad. The Phillies, they let another one slide away yesterday. Aaron Nola was good in the first 4 innings. It was a 1-0 game. Then he got tagged for 4 in the 5th. A 3-run shot by Christopher Morel, the big blow. And when you're giving up a 3-run homer to the ninth guy in the order, and I'm not going to say Morel is a slouch because, he's been pretty good as a rookie. But he's bounced around in that Chicago lineup. And, let's face it, as much as I'm a Cubs fan, this is a team that is, even after that win yesterday, is 17 games below 500. This is a team you should be beating when you look at it. But you're looking at a Phillies team, they do this all the time. They play well for a long stretch, and then they fall apart. You look, they've in the month of September, just in the last couple of weeks even, they had a 5-game losing streak. Then they won 3 straight. And now they've lost 4 in a row. So you're talking about a stretch where they've lost 9 of their last 12. In the month of September, the Phillies are, let's see. The Phillies came into September with a record of 73-58. So they were 15 games above 500. They've gone 10-13 in the month. And, now you've got Milwaukee chasing you down. And that's the last place you want to be, is having a team like the Brewers who, don't hit well most of the year. Their pitching staff has been a shambles, and they look up and they only find themselves half a game out of a wild card spot with about a week to go in the season. Philadelphia's schedule, like I said, they finished for the Cubs today. They play 4 against Washington over the weekend. And then they have to play 3 games at Houston to end the regular season. Meanwhile, we'll take a quick look at the Brewers slate and see who they have left. I'm guessing it might be a little softer landing than facing Houston to close the year. Let's see. Like I said, the Brewers have the Marlins. And let's see. Then they close with 3 against the Diamondbacks. So they've got 7 straight at home to close the year. The Phillies are on the road the rest of the season. Now, the Brewers are going to face a couple stiff pitchers in that stretch in this series against the Marlins. They're going to get Garrett Alcantara tomorrow, Cabrera on Saturday, and Pablo Lopez will go Sunday. And in the opener of that set against the Diamondbacks, they're slated to get Zach Gallen. So, there is that in the equation. Corbin Burns, it's going to be Lauer, then Corbin Burns, then Peralta, and then the ever-popular, we don't know who we're planning on throwing on Sunday situation. Could see, Hauser. You could see, let's see, who do they have left? You could see Costanza. You could see Ashby. None of those options really are appealing And this is a Phillies team that's really, or not a Phillies team, a Brewers team that's had issues with their pitching. Peralta was hurt. Lauer has made one start since coming off the IL. He's going today, but he only went 2 2/3 against the Reds in his first start coming off the shelf. Burns has been inconsistent. The only pitcher they've had that's been good all year long is Woodruff. But that's enough about the Brewers because nobody cares because they're from Milwaukee. Taking a look at the early games so far today, the White Sox and Twins in the battle of we're playing for second place, so we can say, hey, at least we finished second. We weren't third like those other scrubs in the AL Central. That game is tied at 2 in the bottom of the third at Target Field. The pitching matchup for that one was none other than the illustrious Lucas Giolito for the White Sox taking on Louis Varland for the Twins. Reichel would tell you that he's Darius Garland's cousin. Unfortunately, this could not be confirmed. Also, in another battle of AL Central teams with nothing to play for but trying to get out of the cellar, it's the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers at Comerica Park. The Tigers, surprisingly, have won 5 in a row and 7 of 8 going into this game. Tigers up 1-0 in the bottom of the fourth. They have runners on second and third with 2 outs. Heimer Candelario at the plate. Willie Castro with a solo homer in the second inning, his 8th of the year, giving the Tigers that 1-0 lead. The pitchers, John Heasley for the Royals. Eduardo Rodriguez pitching for the Tigers. Then in Boston, the Orioles and the Red Sox closing out a 4-game set. That game is scoreless after 2 frames. Michael Baumann going for the Orioles against the returning Nathan Eovaldi for the Red Sox. They've played 2 innings. They've had 7 at-bats between these two teams with runners in scoring position. They're combined 0 for 7. So that just goes to show you that there's been potential for offense, much like yesterday, just nobody's capitalized. Then, like we said, the Cubs game will start in about 7 or 8 minutes. That coming to you from Wrigley Field. An opportunity for the Phillies to try to right the ship before they head out for the weekend to face Washington. They're at the point where they're facing dire straits, and we're not talking your money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now, with that said, we've got plenty of stuff to talk about today. We got a couple college football games. We've got Major League Baseball, the games that, haven't started already. There's still 6 that'll go on this evening out of the 10. And, of course, we've got Thursday night football. The Miami Dolphins on the road as they travel to face the Cincinnati Bengals. Should be an interesting matchup there as well. But before we get to all of that, we will start with the ever-popular housekeeping segment. And we'll talk about our sponsor at Caesars. Caesars Sportsbook has a great deal for first-time users. You can get up to $1,250 in free bet insurance. Basically, you place a bet, and if it loses, Caesars will make it right and give you credits towards making another bet, making you whole again. Make sure you download the app today. Always check the age limits in your state. Obviously, this is only available, A, for first-time users, B, it's only available in states where Caesars Sportsbook is. So if you live in, West Chehungaville, might not be available for you. And as we always say, bet responsibly. We don't want to hear about how you literally bet the farm and lost because you thought that, Utah State was going to win. And, of course, if you can't get enough of our picks, and when I say our, it's just a default because I'm used to having a co-host. If the 3,652 games we talk about on a daily basis isn't enough for you, you can check the link in the show box below and get my premium picks, either the individual ones or the parlays. That's the great thing. I'm so good at doing these things. I have 2 different options. So, if you want to do parlays, those are there. If you want to do, individual game picks, those are there. So it's all about options, right? But yes, click the link in the show box below. Also, check out Winners and Winers and their YouTube channel for free picks all day long. You can get free videos from the Scott and Scott Connection, Dave Delano, Mason Foles, the rest of those guys. I used to do them, but frankly, with all the other stuff I do, I just don't have the time most of the time to do them. Now, with that said, is there any games that you guys want to talk about before we get into the parlay segment of the show? Anything out there at all that is intriguing, that you guys have questions about, you want to kick around, mull over, and so forth? If so, feel free to throw them out there and we can talk about them for the next 15 minutes or so before we get into the other stuff. And of course, don't forget, we're also in the era of preseason hockey now. So hockey will start in earnest in a couple of weeks. The NBA starts in about 3 weeks. Preseason hoops, I believe, start this weekend. So plenty of stuff to go around. Of course, Andrew wants to talk about the Dolphins and the Bengals. JR wants to talk about South Carolina and South Carolina State. We'll cover that one first because it'll be pretty quick. South Carolina State, in their one game against a FBS opponent this year, was beat 56-10 by UCF. This game was originally going to be Saturday. They moved it because of the weather. Because, like I said, South Carolina State's out near Orangeburg. The weather is supposed to come up the East Coast, hit through Charleston and things like that, and make a mess of things. So they decided it was safer to move it to Thursday to avoid all that. You look here, South Carolina State, they also lost to North Carolina A&T last week, 41-27 on the road. Their one win came at Bethune-Cookman on September 10th. They beat them 33-9. Now, South Carolina has not been great by any stretch of the imagination. I know everybody, and I say everybody here, speaking of, is in the Columbia area, which is about an hour and a half or 2 hours from here. I'm stuck in the triangle of hell where either you hear people talk about the Gamecocks or you hear people talk about Clemson, and I can't stand either team. But everybody was excited when Spencer Rattler transferred over, but he hasn't really done anything of substance to talk about. You look at the Gamecocks, they beat Georgia State to open the year 35-14 on the help of a couple blocked punts. They lost to Arkansas on the road, 44-30. Then they got destroyed by number 1 Georgia, losing 48-7 in a game where they were fortunate to get 7 late in the fourth quarter. But they are coming off a 56-20 demolition of Charlotte last Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium. They made Charlotte look pedestrian, which is what you would expect for a crummy team like the 49ers. Rattler probably had what was his best game, but if you look deeper into it, he was only 17 of 23 for 187 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Carolina did most of their damage on the ground. They scored 6 touchdowns rushing, ran for close to 300 yards. I'm not going to sit here and say South Carolina State's going to do a whole lot. But I'm going to I'm going to lean towards South Carolina to win this game and cover the line. They're not going to cover it by a whole lot, so I could see if you wanted to lay point or take the points with South Carolina State. I just don't know if they'll score enough because I think the Gamecocks have some confidence after last week, after hanging 56 on Charlotte. South Carolina State's overmatched. it could be, South Carolina could get a 50 burger here. But I'll lean towards the Gamecocks to hold my nose and give the points just because you can't trust an FBS or FCS team in this spot. As for the Dolphins, last I heard, and that was earlier this afternoon, Tagovailoa was supposedly going to start. Now, I haven't heard and didn't. I'm just going to check through all my information here, make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, David Furones of the Orlando Sun Sentinel had him listed as Tagovailoa is expected to play. Let's see. Tom Pelissero also said he's listed to play. Just making sure that I'm not missing anything on an injury report. Yeah, the Miami Herald says that he's supposed to play, so I don't think he's going to miss the game if he can help it. According to that report also that came out from the NFL Network, Jalen Waddle is supposed to be good to go. Teron Armstead is supposed to be good to go. They ruled out a couple backup tight ends, but nobody cares because those guys aren't going to see the ball anyway. But I think Tua throws an interception. It depends. It depends what he tries to do. If he tries to force a ball into coverage, it's definitely a viable option. Cincinnati secondary, we've heard Tagovailoa talk a bunch of crap about how if Tyreek Hill is in one-on-one coverage against Eli Apple, he's going to go deep. My concern about that is you had Buffalo playing their 37th string quarterback or corner that they just drafted or brought off the practice squad, and you didn't go deep against them. Why would you try and go deep against a guy that's a veteran? You look here and, Tagovailoa, he's only thrown 2 interceptions on the year on 101 pass attempts. I think if he tries to go deep at some point and it's off target at all, he runs the risk of getting picked. It depends on how aggressive Cincinnati's defense is with Lou Anarumo's scheme. Will he do something to try and throw Miami off guard? As for the question about will the Bengals offensive line protect Joe Burrow? Well, that's the burning question pretty much every week, isn't it? How will they perform? On the plus side, they looked pretty decent last week against that Jets front four. Burrow had time to throw the ball. He was sacked only twice, which is saying something. The Bengals secondary did pick off Flacco twice. They sacked him 4 times. There's a blow for the Bengals as DJ Reader was placed on IR. I think he has a knee injury. Takes a big space eater out of the middle of that defensive line. They'll have to step up and replace him. But it depends. If Miami tries to run the same kind of 6 and 7 man blitzes that they were running against Buffalo, then they might overwhelm Cincinnati's line. But if they'd have to try to play complacent and go and just rush 4 or 5 guys, as opposed to trying to run all these exotic, they ran a lot of safety blitzes and corner blitzes and all out flat out blitz attacks. If they try that and they don't get home by some fluke where Cincinnati's offensive line holds up, and you look and they're actually La'el Collins is questionable, but that's it. Everybody else is ready to go. I don't want – if I'm Miami, I have to weigh the fact about blitzing Burrow against the fact that my secondary is shredded because you still don't have Byron Jones. Xavier Howard dealing with a groin issue. He didn't really stop Diggs last week. Brandon Jones is banged up at the safety spot. Can you afford to run the risk of a blitz and hope that your secondary can hold up? And that's where I'd be concerned. Because with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and, you can run Hayden Hurst up the seam or anything like that. There's a lot of weapons for Burrow to throw to. I've got some rushing and receiving props on the slides coming up for that, Andrew. I'm not expecting either team to run the ball a whole lot. You look, Miami comes into this one. Their leading rusher is Chase Edmonds with 79 yards, and then Mostert has 78 yards, and they're both averaging under 3.5 yards a carry. Miami's only averaging 64 yards a game on the ground. That's not really going to get it done. And you look at Cincinnati. Cincinnati will run the ball a lot, but they don't run it successfully. You look, and they're averaging 3.3 yards a carry as a team. Mixon's running 58 times for 163 yards. That's only 2.8 yards a carry. And their second leading rusher is Burrow. Now, I will say this because I didn't put this one in on the prop. But Burrow's rushing total is set at 11.5 yards. Now, he's already averaging almost 24, 25 yards a game in the first 3 games of the year. And he's got the mobility where if they blitz and he gets flushed out, he can scramble. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not a Lamar Jackson. He's not a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts. But he is effective enough that he can pick you up 7, 8, 9 yards at a time and move the sticks. Hey, running for your life yards still count. Like Jesse Ventura used to say, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. Doesn't matter if you're running for your life or if you're just taking a leisurely stroll down the sideline because everybody ran downfield and forgot about the quarterback. They all count. All those yards count the same. But at 11.5 yards, I'd be inclined to think Burrow exceeds that fairly easily. As far as other ones, let me see what we got here because I was looking at some of them earlier this afternoon. I saw Bet365 had one where you could loop a bunch of them together. I'm a little leery about a couple of them. Like I don't think I would chase Tyreek Hill. His yardage probably I think was 76.5. Like I said, I just watched you catch 2 passes for 33 yards last week against a secondary that had no players. And they've got it set at 75.5. Now, sure, he could get a deep ball. I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying I would rather see some production out of him. The two, like Tyler Boyd, over 39.5. He's a good safety valve. He's a good slot guy that can make some plays there. He's got value. And these are ones that I don't have up already, so that's why I'm throwing these out. Let's see. For receptions, I could see Higgins being heavily involved as well. You could go, over 5.5 receptions is plus 115. Because you know that Howard is probably going to be covering Chase. So that means you've got either Nick Needham or I don't even remember who Miami's 17 string corner is. Kohu, is that his name? Either way, we saw a lot of secondary receivers last week get involved for Buffalo. Isaiah McKenzie caught a bunch of passes. Then you had who else was active? Devin Singletary caught a bunch out of the backfield. So you could look at somebody like Mixon being more involved in the passing game. They like to throw to him anyway. He's got his over-under on receptions is 3.5. The over is plus 110. That's another option as well. Yeah, Andrew said watch Hayden Hurst's touchdown. Yeah, well, Hurst is a valuable asset for the Bengals because he gives them something they didn't necessarily have before. Because you think about it, and they had, after Uzoma left, they were trying to throw to Drew Sample and guys like that. They weren't really the same kind of style. Hurst is able to get upfield, stretch the seam, and make some plays that are useful in the passing game. And he's caught 11 balls already on the season, so it wouldn't surprise me. He's probably due for a touchdown. He doesn't have one yet. It's just tough because there's so many mouths to feed in that Bengals pass offense. So with that in mind, we can now move to the parlay section of the show. Start with 2 for the money because that's what it says there. Like I said, there's only 6 baseball games this evening, so makes it a little bit more complicated. We're going to start with the Giants over the Rockies. The Giants beat Colorado again last night. It's Carlos Rodon going for the Giants. Ryan Feltner getting the start for the Rockies. Feltner has been bad on the road this season. Of course, that's not saying much. The whole Rockies team have been bad on the road all year long. They don't score a lot of runs on the road. And Rodon has been very good as far as shutting teams down, especially at Oracle Park. I don't have any faith in Colorado with their lack of offensive production. They're dead last in the majors and runs on the road this season. So back the Giants in that one. I'm not adverse to backing them on the run line. Like I said, they won 6-3 last night. Should be another one-sided game tonight as long as Rodon doesn't, break a blister or crack a nail or, kick a bat at his teammate. They should be fine. The Mariners took a big step towards clinching their first playoff spot since 2001 after beating the Rangers yesterday. Rubber game tonight. John Gray going against Marco Gonzalez. When I look at the Rangers, what I think is, now they've gotten some bats in their lineup. Maybe they'll actually become competent if they can get some pitching. Gray had some stretches where he pitched well, but he's been injury prone a lot. The Rangers have lost his last 5 starts. He's 0-3 in that span, including losing to Cleveland in his last start, where he gave 1 run, none earned on 1 hit, a walk, and a strikeout in 5 innings, as the Rangers lost 6-3. In those 5 starts, the Rangers have given up a total of 30 runs while scoring 14. Gonzalez hasn't been great. He's been your typical mediocre guy. That's probably at this point a 3, maybe a 4 in the rotation because you've got Kirby and you got Castillo and those guys. But, he's consistent in the fact that, you're going to get five and 2/3, maybe 6 innings out of him. If he could keep the ball in the park, he'd probably be a lot more successful. He's got 27 homers and 171 innings this year. Texas has some pop, but their pitching doesn't hold up, and I'll take the Mariners in that one. The Angels and the A's, battle of two teams going nowhere. It's Cole Irvin going against Shohei Ohtani. Everybody likes Ohtani. Everybody hates the A's. Oakland doesn't hit well at all. And it's tough to have a ton of faith in a team like the A's that traded away all their players before the season started. Ohtani's won his last 3. He's given up a total of 3 runs over 17 innings in that stretch. And if you go back a couple more starts, the Angels have won his last 5 outings. In those games, they've given up a total of 5 runs. Ohtani's given up 4 in 32 innings in that stretch while striking out, 22, 36. So as long as he doesn't walk 6 guys like he did against the Twins in his last start, he'll go more than 5 innings. His last 2 starts against the A's, 5 and 2/3, 3 runs, 2 earned, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, then 6 scoreless, 4 hits, 3 walks, and 5 strikeouts. The A's have shown some fight. I just don't trust them here. Irvin throws a lot of junk. And with Trout and Ohtani and Taylor Ward in the middle of that lineup for the Angels, you have to think they can take advantage of the slew of crap. What would I play on the run line? Probably the Giants, just because I've seen too many times where the A's will score a bunch of runs when you don't expect them to. We saw it with Seattle last week when they knocked Kirby out early in that game. When Rachel and I were talking about alternative K numbers and things like that. The Rockies, we know what they are. They're just bad on the road. You look at their numbers away from Coors, they're 24 and 50 or something like that. I'm just going to pull it up so I make sure I don't misquote my own numbers. But it's hard to trust Colorado to do anything often. Yeah, 24 and 50. They've scored only 221 runs in 74 road games on the year. You look at their road splits. At Coors Field, you expect them to score. Unfortunately for the Rockies, they don't play at Coors Field the rest of the season. In 74 road games, the Rockies are hitting 225 as a team with a 286 on-base percentage and a 332 slugging percentage. They've only got 43 homers away from Coors compared to 98 at Coors Field. They scored 456 runs at Coors, so they've more than doubled their offensive production on the road by playing at Coors Field this year. Absolutely abysmal as a road team. The Giants, they have flickering hopes, and I say flickering because when you look at it, they're 6.5 back with 7 to go. But, the way the Phillies are playing, they're not dead yet. By the way, the Cubs scored in the bottom of the first. An RBI double by Patrick Wisdom. They still have runners on the corners with 2 outs in the first inning. The Phillies looking like they might want to melt it away. And, Nathan, I feel bad for you because you were just talking about the first 5 under 4 for the Tigers, and now it's 5-0. I'm glad that the Dodgers and the Mariners panned out for you last night, Gio. That was a good one. The Dodgers game, we talked about how we expected it to be low scoring with Musgrove and Urias, and nobody scored until the 10th. So low scoring 1-0 game there. well-pitched contest. It was strange to see Josh Hader actually throw a scoreless inning because you don't see that very often since he came over in that trade. And that was one of those trades that worked out for nobody because Rodgers has been terrible for Milwaukee out of the bullpen. Hader has been brutal for the Padres out of the bullpen. And now both these teams are fighting to potentially face each other in the first round of the playoffs. So that ought to be interesting to say the least. And then I like the Bengals over the Dolphins. Here you look. Miami's defense is banged up. They were gashed for almost 500 yards. They're coming off a short week after having to play 90 snaps in that humidity and such. You know, they've got a lot of guys that are banged up. They got some guys that are missing. Cincinnati is out to get back to 500. They're at home. They had a little bit easier of a time dispatching the Jets than we saw from Miami's game there. I'm going to take the Bengals. I'm not thrilled about it, but I'm also not thrilled about Miami with all those issues. Tagovailoa with his back injury. Who knows if he'll make it through. For all we know, he might get banged up again too. But I'll lean towards Cincinnati there. Jalen Daniels plus 6,000 to win the Heisman. Well, you're right. It's definitely going to be a long shot just because you look at Kansas's history. As being a doormat for so long. If the success continues, well, I mean, we're talking about they'd have to beat some pretty decent teams. Because we talked about they've got some rough schedule coming up in the second half of October with Oklahoma, Baylor, then Oklahoma State. They'd probably have to win at least two of those for him to be kept in serious consideration. And then he'd probably still have to beat Kansas State in the finale in Manhattan. But there's stranger things have happened in the world of college football that we've seen it over the years. I think Daniels has really acquitted himself well. I hope that he decides to stay for his senior year next year, because I think another year in the system with Leopold and some of these other guys, plus you might be able to bring in some new talent, would work in his favor for 2023. But I like him. He's been very effective. He throws the ball well. He knows not to force it. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's effective as a dual threat quarterback. And let's face it, the fact that anybody's even talking about a guy from Kansas to win the Heisman Trophy when we're heading into the first weekend of October is a win for the program itself, just as it stands. Because when's the last time you talked about anybody that played football for Kansas? I mean, who's the last notable player that played at Kansas that anybody talked about? You have to go back, probably Gale Sayers, maybe would probably be the biggest. John Hadel. You could, I guess, if you want to go more recent, you could probably say Talib or Chris Harris. But that just shows you there's not a ton of history surrounding Kansas as far as big-name college football players. According to NFL.com, they say that the top players that ever come out of the school, let's see, Gilbert Brown who played for Green Bay. Bobby Douglas played in the 60s and 70s. Dana Stubblefield. And John Riggins, of course. I forgot about Riggins. So Riggins and Sayers are the biggest names, but you're talking half a century ago. So for Daniels to be mentioned as a name like that and being considered for a Heisman, even showing up on the odds, even if it's 60-1, is a win for that program because it just shows you how long it's been where you've heard of these names. Yes, give yourself a gold star, Andrew. You spelled Hadel correctly. Of course, he was a great quarterback back in the old AFL days and such. But yeah, I give Leopold a ton of credit. I liked him when he was at UB before he took the Kansas job. Seems to be an ongoing trend. You see these guys at mid-major programs get snapped up by a big power school or Power 5 school. Happened with Nate Oates when he got picked up by Alabama to coach basketball. But I'm glad to see the success that he's had. Goes to 4 for the show. I'm going to go with the Guardians here. They're a slight underdog against Tampa Bay. It's Jeffrey Springs going against Cal Quantrill. If there's one thing that you've heard Reichel and I talk about during the course of his time when he was on the show, it's that Quantrill is the king of run support because for some reason, when he pitches, Cleveland scores a ton of runs. Average run support in game starter for Quantrill, 5.79 runs per game. He's gotten at least 5 runs of support in 18 of his 30 starts this season. He comes in 14-5 with a 349 earned run average. If you didn't want to go that route, there's always the ever popular pitcher outs recorded. Quantrill is to go over 17.5 outs, so to go at least 6 innings, minus 115. Last handful of starts, he's gone 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6. So he's gone at least 6 and 7 of his last 10 starts. He only had one down start, which was against the Mariners at the beginning of September, where he went 3. I believe that game was interrupted by rain because he had only thrown 56 pitches in that contest. But I expect Cleveland to win that one. I like Springs. I just don't trust Tampa Bay's offense. We've seen how they sputter for long stretches. And it's just tough to have faith. And nostalgia, that's what it's all about. We can sit here and talk about the USFL. We've talked to Pete Medhurst before. I was talking to him the other day about, who would win in a game between the Commanders and the Washington Federals. I'm sure some of you guys remember the Federals from the old USFL back in the 80s. Always finding new ways to lose. And that basically sums up the Commanders, doesn't it? For the Thursday night props, here's 3 of them right here. Yeah, a lot of people have won good money with Springs, especially on the strikeout props, because for some reason he gets criminally undervalued as far as the number of guys he can punch out, because they always set his number around 4.5 or so. And today it's at 4.5 is minus 115. So that's actually shifted down, I believe, because I think I saw it higher than that this morning. I'll have to look at my slide after, but yeah, there's been plenty of money made on guys like Springs because they're guys that nobody thinks about because they're like, oh, he pitches for Tampa Bay, so he probably pitches like 3 innings and then they go to somebody else. Well, Springs has done a decent job, And I'm not going to take anything away from him. He's done a great job of keeping his team in the game. And now you're looking over 6 strikeouts for Springs or 6 or more so over 5.5 is plus 176. Over 6.5 strikeouts is up to plus 360. Now, I know some of that's tempered by the fact that Cleveland doesn't strike out a whole lot, but like we said, they fanned 13 times yesterday in that game. Thursday night props, here we go. Jamar Chase over 73.5 receiving yards. Like I said, Howard didn't stop Diggs last week. Diggs had 7 for 74, I think. Chase has the ability to go deep if Burrow has time to throw one. I like Waddle over 67.5 receiving yards. I think he'll get a lot of work underneath and he'll break a couple tackles. But there's more volume, it seems, for him than there is for Tyreek Hill. And Burrow over 268.5 yards. Let's face it, Cincinnati can't run the ball. We talked about that already. They run the ball a lot in volume. They don't pick up a lot of yards. If Miami's ahead, Cincinnati's going to have to throw. If it's a close game, Cincinnati's going to have to throw anyway. And if they're ahead, Cincinnati might want to throw because Miami is decent against the run, but they can't stop the pass. We saw that last week. So I expect Burrow to throw for probably close to 300. Take advantage of that banged up secondary. Put them out in a situation where they have to decide whether they can keep blitzing or if they have to back out of that and give more help to guys like Needham and Howard. If they do, and you get Burrow in a rhythm, it's just as bad for Miami. So they're going to have to find a happy medium in there. Looking at the scores, like Andrew said, the Red Sox just tied the game at 2 at the bottom of the 4th. With Baltimore, nice to see that they're scoring runs today instead of yesterday. Cassis with an RBI double, Kiki Hernandez with an RBI single in the second. In the third, Adley Rutschman had an RBI ground out for Baltimore, and then Mateo scored on an error. Twins and White Sox tied at 2. They're now in the 6th. Varland is done after 5 innings. Griffin Jacks is now in for the Twins. Giolito has thrown 93 pitches and 5 for the White Sox. Not sure if you'll see him coming out in the bottom of the frame. Tigers 5, Royals nothing. Like we said, Willie Castro with his 8th homer of the year. Javier Baez with his 16th. That coming in the 5th inning. Riley Green with an RBI double and a run scored also on an error by Vinny Pasquantino. John Heasley done after 4 2/3. Clark got the final out of the 5th. Brad Keller on in relief now in the 6th for the Royals. Rodriguez, 6 scoreless, 5 hits, a walk, and 3 strikeouts for the Tigers as they look for win number 6 in a row. Too bad nobody told Detroit that the season ends next week because they might actually think they were relevant. Though a win here would put them half a game ahead of the Royals and into 4th place in the AL Central. So kudos for that. Meanwhile, David Boat just wrapped a double to center for the Cubs leadoff man on in the bottom of the 2nd. The Cubs leading 1-0 on the Phillies, who continue to show just how easily you can blow yourself out of a playoff spot. JC said, thanks for the Yankees pick. DraftKings had a weird offer of the Mets or Yankees at plus 100. Well, hey, nothing wrong with that. Getting plus 100 is good because I think the Yankees were going about minus 125. I don't remember what the Mets were, like minus $6 billion. Let me see. What were they at yesterday? I'm trying to remember who pitched. Because they played so bad. They were minus 196 at close. But they were down 4-0 after 6.5 before rallying to win that one. who was it was Lazardo and Walker. That's right. But glad that worked out for you, JC. Like James said, get that money. That takes us to the shot in the dark. Makes it a little tougher when there's only, like I said, a handful of games since we had some that started already. I'm going to go with Marcus Semien over 1.5 total bases. After that slow start to the year, Semien has picked it up. He's been a lot better in the second half of the season. I know you look at his numbers and you're like, well, yeah, but he's still only batting, 254. Sure, but he started the year like 2 for 703. So he's got 24 homers. He's got 78 RBIs. He's stolen 24 bags. He's got the speed that he can get you the extra base hits. He's got 31 doubles and 5 triples on the year. And, I guess the one thing that you can't overlook is he's cut down on his strikeouts. He struck out 146 times last year, 110 this year. So he's learned a little plate discipline. He's drawn 52 walks. I think he can get on there. All right, free cheeseburgers. Can't go wrong with free cheeseburgers either. Eugenio Suarez came back off the IL earlier this week. Couldn't come back at a better time for the Mariners because, let's face it, with Julio Rodriguez on the shelf, there's not a ton of guys that you can rely on consistently to do damage offensively for the Mariners. I mean, you got Mitch Haniger, but he's missed a bunch of time earlier this year. I mean, come on, you relied on Carlos Santana. Ty France has been good for the most part. Suarez had 3 hits last night in his second game since coming off the shelf. Now let's face it, if you just want to go with half a total base, you can get it at minus 115. But, Suarez has the capability of going deep. He's got 5 homers in his last 10 coming into this one, including a pair of 2 home run games against the White Sox and the Braves. So over 1.5 at plus 210, I'll take it. If you want to chase the home run prop for Suarez, plus 600 tonight. So some good numbers there. Yeah, I like the Guardians and the Giants on the money line. Like I said, I think the Giants should handcuff Colorado completely. They should win on the run line, too. Speaking of the Guardians, Jose Ramirez over 1.5 total bases. I know Springs pitches well, but at some point they're going to have to go to the bullpen, and Cleveland's got to get some production out of Ramirez. It can't just be Kwan and Rosario and guys like that. So I think he'll have a good game tonight. Mike Trout over 1.5 total bases, still plus money. You figure it out. We talk about this all the time. How a guy that can homer practically at will. It seems like how you can get him at plus money. I get the fact that Irvin's a left-hander, but let's face it, Trout has a ton of pop in the bat. He's got a 3.11 average against left-handed pitching this year. 8 doubles, 9 homers, 19 RBIs, and 106 plate appearances. Like I said, Irvin doesn't impress me because he throws a lot of crap. And usually that comes back to haunt you. I'll take Trout at the plus money there. I'm going to go with the Marlins over the Brewers. Like we talked about earlier, Milwaukee's pitching has been in a bit of a shambles. Lauer only went 2 2/3 against the Reds in his first start off the shelf. The bullpen hasn't been great. Miami wants to do nothing more than screw other playoff teams over. Look what they did to the Mets. They should be able to get the job done here. Now, Ohtani over 7.5 strikeouts, minus 118. If you go with the alternative over 8.5, it's plus 162. Let me just check and see if you want to go further up that ladder, what that would be. Because I know he's got the potential to hit double digits, given the fact that the A's lineup is so bad. Alternative strikeouts for Ohtani, over 9, or I'm sorry, 9 plus is plus 1, or sorry, 10 plus is plus 285. So there's that as well. I think he should get a pretty good chunk against them. Do the Dodgers care to get the W today? Well, they're gonna. Gratterall is the opener. They're supposed to go to Heaney afterwards. Manaea, I think, is supposed to go for San Diego. At least that's what the original plan was. If that's the case, Manaea has been terrible against the Dodgers in his career. I don't think it matters whether they care or not. They've just got enough talent that they can win anyway. And I also agree with Andrew. The Red Sox yellow uniforms are ugly. I have no idea what the hell they were thinking. The only ones that rank up there that badly for me are the Padres, cotton candy or whatever the hell it is. Somebody threw a bunch of highlighters in with a white shirt in the washing machine and they exploded. That's what the Padres uniforms remind me of. Carlos Rodon, similar situation to Ohtani on the strikeout front. Just going to pull up his up, and it looks like the Padres have decided not. Are they not going with Manaea, or are they going to? Are the Padres using an opener too? Because I'm seeing Wilson now is listed as going. So let's see. Well, this still says Manaea would be scheduled, but he's 0-3 with a 14.49 ERA against the Dodgers this season. Well, that's a good reason why maybe they wouldn't want to start him. So we'll see if they just decide to go to a bullpen day or if they actually will go with Manaea. We'll have to wait and see on that. On the Rodon front, if you look at his alternative strikeout numbers for today, 9 plus 180, 10 plus 340. If you wanted to go really crazy, to strike out at least 11 is plus 600, and to strike out an even dozen or more plus 1,100 on Rodon. He's got 227 punch outs and 172 innings of work this year. Wouldn't surprise me if he puts the numbers up. Springs we talked about already. Braxton Garrett, let's face it, Milwaukee has a lot of guys that like to strike out in the middle of that lineup. Hell, it's not even just the middle of the lineup, it's the whole lineup. Just take a look at his alternative numbers now. We've got over 7 plus 164, over 8 plus 340, over 9, well, at least 9, I should say, plus 630. And if he were to get to double digits, plus 1,200. And finally, T. Higgins, over 64.5 receiving yards. I just think the Bengals are going to have to throw the ball. Like I said, I like Boyd's numbers too. Andrew says Burrow is minus 102 for an interception. Tua is minus 130. Neither defense picks off a ton of passes. And Cincinnati had 2 last week on Flacco, but that's Flacco. Miami didn't pick any last week. They didn't do a whole lot against Baltimore. I mean, the potential is there, but you look, Burrow had those picks in the opener. He hasn't thrown any in the last 2 games. The option's there if you want to take it. I'm not overly convinced that it'll happen, but anything can happen. Let's be honest. We've seen it. The one college game that I didn't touch on, we talked about it a bit yesterday. BYU, Utah State. Utah State, a train wreck. Since winning their opener, they've been obliterated. They were obliterated by Alabama. They were whipped by Weber State in a pay game. So they paid Weber State to come to Utah and kick their asses. And then they lost to UNLV. BYU 19th in the country. They bounced back after losing to Oregon. They beat Wyoming. They're at home. They've already beaten Baylor at home. Utah State, I don't think has much of a shot here. I expect BYU to win this one going away. I just don't think Utah State looks good offensively. They haven't stopped anybody defensively at all. Like we talked about the other day, the Aggies are near the bottom of the nation in scoring offense and in scoring defense. So I guess you could say at least they're consistent. But they aren't moving the ball through the air. They don't run the ball well. It's like Jim Morris said, we couldn't run the ball. We couldn't complete a pass. We couldn't get a first down. Every time they had the ball, they scored points. It sucked. We stunk. That's Utah State. And there we go. Yeah, that's true. The interception by Daniel Jones, or on Daniel Jones, was a big plus by Trevon Diggs the other night. But that wraps up the show for today. We will be back tomorrow. We'll have plenty of college football to talk about heading to the weekend. We'll also just touch a bit on the NFL. We'll talk about what happened in the Thursday night game and whatever else we decided that comes up that's worth talking about. So we will see you tomorrow for Friday, for Winners and Winers, and for Just Parlays with Chris King. I'm Chris King, in case you didn't know. Have a good day. We'll catch you tomorrow, guys. And stay safe out there with the weather. Hopefully you everyone you know, all your friends and family have made it through this difficult time. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.